The main takeaway is that we need to have an adequate and sufficient definition of rights and morality. And if we do not, and if we just take the negative abstract version of it, the first two moments of Sittlichkeit, ethicity, I don't really know what the term is in English, like ethic life, then we suffer. And that's the real consequences. So this series is called Me, Me. Wait, me? Essentially, I will be going through two things, the idea of right and the idea of morality. And this would be led by reading a few passages from Honneth's Leiden an Unbestimmtheit, which is, I think in English, Pathologies of Individual Freedom. This book is a commentary or a rereading of Hegel's Grundlinien der Philosophie des Rechts, in English, the foundations or the principles of the philosophy of rights. The first video, which is this one, I will be focusing on introducing what actually is this concrete suffering and where it comes from. And the second is I will be talking about rights. This would be to show Hegel's opposition of Fichte and Kant's definition of rights. And then it's the idea that we go from an excess of self-will, so like I need to assert my rights all the time, to the second, which is the moderation of how it is that we exert ourselves in the social context. So you go from the excess of self-will, self-entitlement, to the context sensible Persönlichkeit, sensible personality. So let us begin with the three expressions of these pathologies of individual freedom. The first is Einsamkeit, solitude, Leerheit, vacuity or emptiness, oder Gedrucktheit, so burden. And it is this three that he calls the suffering of indeterminacy. So you can kind of see like this feeling of how it is that we are cut off, we are empty on the inside, and there's a sense of a burden, whether it is that you feel like the burden of obligation or burden in terms of the social relation. So I'll leave that to you to find its practical implication. So there are two other sentences that I found interesting. Here I took the translation from the English book. Social reality is not indifferent to the use of false or incomplete definitions of human existence, and that social reality is always permeated by rational reasons to such an extent that a practical infringement of them is bound to create dislocations in social life. The idea is that if you're led by a certain reasoning, and this reasoning is based on an inadequate definition, you will practice your life in a certain way that will cause the social dislocation. So how it is that you feel these pathologies based on the fact that you are led by an inadequate definition. So this is why it's important to think, and it's important to do philosophy, because there's also this thing about like the therapeutic nature of philosophy, which Honneth compares to Wittgenstein's approach. Essentially, when you débarrasser, like when you get rid of misunderstandings, you find a certain kind of clarity and peace with this clarity because you are no longer being led astray by false problems. So let's move on to rights, and I will introduce to you first Fichte and Kant. So page 31. Im Gegensatz zu Kant oder Fichte, so in contrast to Kant or Fichte, die beide mit dem Begriff des Rechts die staatliche Ordnung legal geregelten Zusammenlebens meinten und daher vom Allen auf das Moment der staatlichen Zwingbarkeit abhoben. So Hegel does not see, like Kant or Fichte, the concept of rights as this state order, legal state order that reigns or that controls or that manages the Zusammenlebens, like the living together. The crux of this Kant-Fichte conception is that rights is something that is coercive, something that is kind of invasive, something that is to manage people. For Hegel, it is much more that you need these rights to actually achieve free will. Because if these rights are a way to order people to make sure that they live together, you can kind of see like how it is that it is, my rights end where yours begin. That's like the rights then become frontiers. It becomes kind of like a tension or kind of like a cause for conflict. So if I exert all my rights, I don't give a about your rights, and likewise. So to go back a bit to my classes on Hegel, essentially this moment of abstract rights is essential, but we just don't stop here. The reason why it is essential is because when you are a person who possesses rights, you are a person. You are no longer this individual that is determined by your race, your gender, all these natural determinancies that justifies your submission or you being dominated by someone else, because everyone is determined or identified by this right that everyone shares. However, the question now becomes how it is that we arrive at the positive version or the actualized version of these rights that would enable us to maintain our relationship within community and not so much put us in opposition with the other, l'autrui. And then I skip a little bit, and then it goes to how it is that these are the conditions of realization or attainment of free will, in the essential relations of communication with the other, that the subject can enable one to be in anderem bei sich selbst sein, which is to be in the other as if you are at home, bei sich selbst sein. So yeah, this is how we go from it being something that regulates people, rights being something that regulates people to live together. And it is more of like how it is that to Hegel's conception of rights being the prerequisites, the conditions of this substantiating of free will, but that which links us to the other. So let me go to the next part, which is on the excess of free will, and from there becoming more context sensible, aware, and the idea of moderation, if I can find the page. So he calls this excess of free will, page 59, as Übermaß an Eigensinn, so excess of self-will or stubbornness. And this is in contrast with context sensible. It's like a French pronunciation. Oh god. Context sensible Persönlichkeit, a context sensible person. The idea here is the correct measure, rechte Maß, in der Anwendung seiner Recht zu bewahren weiß. To know how it is to measure the application of one's rights. This is what he calls the Pathologie einer Fixierung auf die rechtliche Freiheit. So the pathology of fixation on legal freedom. So the next part that I thought was interesting is that how it is that if you have this fixation on your personal legal freedom, despite everyone else who is in society, this is exactly what is that prevents this thing that he calls Teilnahme, so participation, an soziale Leben. So it makes you unfähig, incapable of participating in society, because you lose this participation and you lose this sympathy with others. In this view, the formal right, it is about the ausgewogene Anwendung. It is about the balanced application. And it is the rechtliche Befugnisse, a correct competence, and das überhaupt ein Bewusstsein, that this awareness of when it is that you choose to apply your rights with competence is the opportunities to link you with others. So essentially, like, if I take into account that I'm not only fixed on asserting my rights all the time, it means that I'm socially aware. And it means that in my action of any rights that I choose to assert with moderation and competence, I am linking myself to others because it is done in awareness, with awareness of others. And this leads to the konkreten Bindungen, concrete relations, und soziale Rollen, social roles. This is how you choose to withdraw from insisting on this exclusivity to indeterminacy and the openness of what it is that your rights give you. So remember how I said before that when we claim ourselves or we choose to instill ourselves as a person with rights. We remove ourselves of all these determinancies, natural determinancies that justifies the domination of one person over another. And the idea is to not stop at this point, which is this openness and indeterminacy, because you have, like, again, you just escaped all these determinacies towards le vide, the leerheid, the vacuity, the emptiness. It is in this way, this moderated, socially aware, context, sensible choice of realizing not all your rights, but certain rights, that you find a kind of determinacy that maintains your singularity and your freedom within society. Obviously, this is idealized because I don't think I could ever make an abstraction of my natural determinancies in general. Of course, like, you would like to believe that everyone just looks around and goes like, people with rights, and not like all these prejudices that we live with. But the idea here is clear. It's like, instead of striving constantly towards this complete withdrawal from any determinacy that causes all these pathologies, to find a way to reinstate yourself within the social context that maintains your individual freedom, but also maintains your relationship with the other so that you don't suffer those pathologies. That's it for rights, and I'll see you in the next one for morality.